What happened to the dinosaurs? We continue to come forward with theory after theory after theory in the church of what happened to the dinosaurs. Unfortunately, not too many people can see the link of this Luciferian order that we talked about last week to see that possibly they weren't supposed to be here at all. Possibly they were something before. They were manipulated, their DNA was manipulated by an enemy of God to make them something that was an abomination and therefore did need to become extinct. Furthermore, what's with all of these ancient cities and their serpent worship? How do they predate Adam? What was going on? It is the final layer of understanding Tom and I's theories about old Earth and young Earth both being correct and science being given a voice in the room. Thank you so much, Brittany, for being on with me for one more week.
I think this is a great series. Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah. Did you know that the Donna Howell Show now has merchandise? I am currently wearing the Theology Isn't Just for Boys royal purple hoodie. But we have a lot of other products coming in this line, as well as some other fun products very soon. We have hoodies, t-shirts, sweaters, bags, cups, stickers, and more. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to see all of the merch options. Now, back to the Donna Howell Show. Yeah, so I'm going to jump right in because it's been a long series for some folks. Let's go ahead and just hit this hard. First of all, we have to remember that when we are looking at dating methods in the science world, as I said in that very first week, when I'm referring to science, I'm referring to genuine reality as we see it. Now, our powers of observation can only go so far. We will make wrong observations. We will scribble wrong notes in our laboratories. We're human. We will make mistakes, even peer-reviewed mistakes. And there will be times where we come forward with a theory and we say, hey, I've got it. I figured it out. Here's the answer to this issue. And everybody will latch on to that answer, sometimes for multiple generations. And then it isn't until hundreds of years later, like our Galileo example earlier on, we kind of catch up with our powers of observation with more advanced technology and understanding and can say, no, the ancients did a really, really good job, or if not the ancients, the fathers of this theory a couple of centuries ago had a great idea. It was so logical what they thought happened, but now we are updating science. Now, see, when science is constantly updating, then science, I don't know, to me, it takes more faith to be an atheist than to see intelligent design, because like the hemoglobin example that we gave a couple of weeks ago as well, it's just, to me, and I say this with all due respect, I am not putting anybody else down, believing in randomized evolution just simply takes way too much faith. Let's jump straight into dinosaurs, because I have some friends, in the old Earth circle, and they get annoyed at this idea that the dinosaurs were on the ark, but then the ark landed on Mount Ararat and everything went out of the ark, and there just wasn't enough surviving vegetation on Earth to keep the dinosaurs and their enormous appetites satisfied. So then they died.
Yeah.
It's like, of all of the I'm sorry, I laugh because to me I'm not laughing at anybody, but to me it's like God had provision. He saved the whole world. He got Noah and his family on the ark, 2 of every kind of animal. Everything thrived and survived, except, whoops, he didn't make sure there was enough bushes and stuff around for the dinosaurs to eat. Well, that's why I chuckle. And I don't mean any disrespect by it, but, it's funny because, like, also in, like, Christian churches, like in Christian shops and stuff like this, you see those little shirts that say, it's got a unicorn or a dinosaur or something on it, and they're looking at it, and the ark is like off in the distance, and they're saying, oh snap, we missed it.
Oh my gosh.
They missed the call to get on the ark. Okay. But seriously, what happened to the dinosaurs? Okay, let's start from the very beginning. All of this is technically an unprovable theory, but it does line up and explain quite a bit of things. Everything, including the crater. We're going to get to all of that. First of all, etymology, very, very quickly, is a dinosaur is from the Greek dinos, which is fearfully or terribly great. and sauros, which is lizard. So the word dinosaur quite literally means a big, scary, scary lizard. All right. They were not initially terribly great. Science says. Now, look, again, as I said in the very, very first week and a few times since then, when I'm referring to science, oftentimes in the book, I'm referring to genuine reality as God has designed it. I'm referring to what we are looking at when we make an observation. I am not referring to our observation or our conclusion, as that is finite and human-based.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's capable of being flawed. So when we look at science dating, a lot of Christians immediately, that when you mention scientific dating of the earth, its layers, its age, whatever, you have this community of Christian defenders that immediately say, well, you cannot trust radiocarbon dating. And I don't know why, and maybe it's just something of my generation and it doesn't really reflect some of the younger generations that are just joining the discussion right now. But I do know that there is this thing where all you got to do is reject radiocarbon dating and you've proven young earth, or you've removed from the discussion all of the evidence against young earth.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is radiocarbon dating is only one of a lot of old earth dating methods.
Right.
First of all, there is the distance from the earth to the stars, which half of the young earthers listening just went, oh, but I got an answer for that one too. And I know that they do, but there's that. There's paleomagnetism, which is, when the North Pole or the South Pole of the Earth shifts, the magnetism pulls in a different direction, in the opposite direction, the polar shift. The direction of the magnetism is trapped in the rocks. We can see the directional pattern in the layers of the rock. We have, of course, rock strata. We have ocean coral reef strata also. So a lot of people don't know this already, but when you are looking at the coral at the bottom of the ocean, especially some of these really ancient reefs, when you drill a very, very fine layer because of the sunshine beating down on the water or the weather patterns or whatever, temperature of the water, sediment, all these different things that happen at different times of the year when the ocean is moving in different kinds of ways, every season has its own layer to the coral. So if you look at a sea coral and you blow it up, it's kind of like this is, autumn, this is spring, whatever. There's 4 distinct seasons, and you can see them when you drill through the coral in its completion. So we have coral layering, which dates certain areas of the earth right now, several million years old. We have the same thing with river sediments, which there's areas in the world right now that when you take a major interstate highway, you can see where they've cut into the river sediments. You could get out of your car. They're called varves, but they're layers of river sedimentation. Right. A lot of young earthers do have their own explanation about rock strata. And the tree that grows up through, millions of years of rock strata, that's a big young earther response. That is very explainable by science, has to do with mud sediments and all of these different things. It's all in the book. The bottom line is people are going to argue. There's going to be your young earthers over here that say, well, you can't trust this because, and you're going to have your scientists that say you have to trust this because. And at the end of the day, you don't really know what you know. So we're still figuring it out. Our scientists, many of them, their hearts are in the right place. They're just doing the best they can to observe and then report what has been observed and what it could potentially imply. Right. But we are in a position right now where, because that is all very human and very finite, again, if science said back in the 20s that pregnant women should smoke, and then now science is saying that smoking while pregnant could lead to birth defects or whatever issues there, we have what is in the world of science a consistently updating things. I am not saying that I hang my entire faith hat on the hat rack called old earth dating methods. The bottom line is there's all of these people that are arguing, and as long as science, the human science, is consistently being updated and updating every single day, then we don't know who to trust on a day-to-day basis. Right. We don't know who has the right answer, not because there's any conspiracies behind the board, but because we just are doing the best we can to observe and report what we observe. Right. So meanwhile, the evidence, the whole evidence, not just radiocarbon dating, folks, but the whole evidence stacks in favor of a very, very old Earth. By the way, the book does cover these sciences very briefly. It gives you like a paragraph or two about what these scientific methods are, how they work, and why what the argument has been against them or in favor of them, or, what the young Earth crowd has come back and said, no, that can't be true because, and then they'll offer, like the tree that grows up through the rock strata. And so things are like that are explained. But the reason I brought that up was to say this. We are left with 3 possibilities for the ancient ruins, and how that all links together with the dinosaurs is really very interesting. That's why we're taking dinosaurs and archaeology at the same time right now, because it kind of all
goes
explodes
together
at the same time in history here. So option number 1, the dating methods are off because scientists make mistakes, or they have conspiracy theories going on, or they conspire to hide the truth or whatever. And the individual site of serpent worship in these ancient ruins is not that old. It's much younger. So the dating is off. That's possibility number 1. Possibility number 2 is that Adam and his descendants were brought into the picture much further back than the James Ussher chronology allows. Adam and Eve were here billions and billions of years ago or whatever. Now, a lot of people will say that doesn't hold up because the genealogy is, the old earther crowd would say, yes, it is, but there are holes in the genealogy whenever, king this or that turned his back on the Lord or whatever. If it wasn't necessary to be mentioned in Kings or Judges, that this person would have been wiped out of the genealogy. There would have been a spot on the record, and then there might have been a gap of missing years. So that's what the old earther would say. And then, of course, I look at both sides and I'm like going, yeah, but could it account for billions of years of missing genealogy? No, which means that I am yet also going back to believing that I think James Ussher, was correct-ish in thinking that Adam came about approximately 4004 BC. But I don't think he was correct that the earth was created at that same time. That's where we differ, because theologically the two narratives split in the Hebrew right there.
Right, and we go into a lot more detail on this in last episode.
Yeah, we do, and the episode before that. Okay, so option number 1, dated methods are off, and the sites are not nearly that old, or the dinosaurs are not nearly that old. Option number 2, Adam and his descendants were brought into the picture way, 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 way long ago, and therefore these ruins and artifacts are actually of Adam's descendants, be they pagan, be they Yahwism, whatever.
Right.
So it was between creation and the flood of Noah's day, or and by the way, I just don't buy that for a lot of reasons I'll explain in the book. Option number 3, someone or something was here on the surface of the earth before Adam, as we know the fallen angels were, and earth was their home, as we just discussed in the last episode. And Adam's birth therefore marks the recreation event, when the world was restored to its former glory, to what God originally wanted earth to be before an enemy hath done this, that created and made this world to be an era of chaos. So we wrote the book assuming that option number 3 is where we're going. And that's a very, very unusual option to take in this. So taking dinosaurs hand in hand with archaeological discovery. We already explained that dinosaurs means terribly or fearfully great lizard.
Yeah.
Big, big, scary lizard. Okay. But the funny thing about that is that science even acknowledges they were not initially terribly great. They were, science attests, this is in several of the studies that we cited in the book, originally the size of a German shepherd and may not have been carnivorous in the beginning. How about that?
Yeah.
So again, science sees dinosaurs are this kind of lizard-ish thing that isn't terribly great. They're about the size of a German shepherd and they eat leaves. Wonder if that's how God designed them to be.
Right.
And then something came along that warped their DNA that also, by the way, put them in a position where they would have to fall under the same judgment that was the catastrophe of the rest of the planet. So if God created the dinosaurs, and if the man science is true when it says that dinosaurs really weren't that big in the beginning and they probably weren't carnivores, What I see theologically when these two worlds collide is God created a German Shepherd-sized lizard thing that was cool, and he thought it was beautiful, and it was his creation, and he probably said it was very good in the very beginning. Satan came along, Genesis 6:4 style, warped them in some weird way with their DNA, created them into some kind of a monstrosity that they shouldn't have been, which, as we said several episodes ago, is marked in the church fathers, the histories, the apocrypha, the earliest earth legends from around the world that these people say, yeah, these big lizard things came and it was really, really scary. Dragons is what they were known in a lot of ancient literature. All of these things happened about the same time that the flood wiped everything out. And then we get this idea that that actually happened 66 million years ago, that the Chicxulub crater came down and hit Earth. And that's what killed the dinosaurs. I am not decided whether or not I think that it had anything to do with the actual judgment of God. I know that it was the judgment of God that wiped out the dinosaurs. I just don't know was that the way he went about doing it?
Right.
Or was it some other ice agey thing? I mean, it could be a number of different, or it could be a combination of different things.
Right.
But the bottom line is science says that these bones of these dinosaurs that we have are 66 million years old. Mankind's science says that these bones that we have are 66 millions or billions of years old. It's so much older than the 6 to 10,000 years of the Usher chronology. So we kind of have to look at whether or not there might be some alternative explanation for the judgment of God, and I think that fits. The historical timeline is actually very interesting with George Pember of Earth's earliest ages. Listen to how he deals with this. Listen to what he says. The fossil remains of dinosaurs indicate pre-adamite ages of sin, for they may be proved to be the relics of not the 6 days of creation, Pember calls this the restoration, but of far earlier creations. For as the fossil remains clearly show, not only were disease and death, which are inseparable companions of sin, then prevalent among the living creatures of the earth, but even ferocity and slaughter. On the 6th day, God pronounced everything which he had made to be very good, a declaration which would seem altogether inconsistent with the present condition of the animal, as well as the vegetable kingdom. Again, he gave the green herb alone for food to every beast of the field and to every fowl of the air and to everything that creepeth upon the earth. Genesis 1:30. There were, therefore, no carnivora in the sinless world. Since then, the fossil remains are those of creatures from before Adam, and yet they show tokens of disease, death, and mutual destruction. They must have belonged to another pre-Adamic world and have a sin-stained history of their own, a history which ended in the ruination of themselves and their habitation earth. So it's kind of like George Pember got it. Now I realize that this is also only theoretical, kind of like the Fifth Watcher. But Dad/Tom Horn always thought, wouldn't it be interesting if there was some kind of a link between the Chicxulub crater and the verse we see over here in Luke 10:18, where Jesus himself sees Satan fall as lightning from heaven? That's interesting. What was it that actually fell? If you read through the book of Revelation, you'll understand that sometimes when a star falls, it's a star, otherwise known as an angelic being, because angels are blowing trumpets and pouring out bowls of wrath, and there's, excitable events happening left and right all around. And so when the star falls from the sky toward the earth, lots of scholars have said that could be a star, a literal one.
Yeah.
It could be an angel, or it could be both. And so Tom said, what if when Jesus says, I saw, past tense, Satan fall as lightning from heaven to earth in Luke 10:18, could Lucifer have been the Chicxulub asteroid? And it's also interesting that the name Chicxulub means the devil's tail. Like, how weird is that? That's interesting and ironic at the very least. So scientists' explanation of the dinosaurs' demise dates them to 66 million years ago. And according to the Harvard Gazette, the Chicxulub brought an end to almost 3/4 of the plant and animal species then living on Earth, including a great number of large marine reptiles. Once again, we're getting a connection between the reptilians and the aquatics in the Fifth Watcher. So that's just very interesting. It's like, how, if it doesn't turn out to be true and it's only a theory, that's okay, and I won't be offended. But I'm sitting here going, is it possible?
Yeah.
Like this thing that fell, that Jesus said he saw fall, like a star from heaven, like lightning from heaven. Is it possible that yeah, we saw that too, and that's where all the dinosaurs went. That was the judgment that God brought upon the earth. Meanwhile, we still have a lot of archaeological sites all over the surface of the earth right now, still standing, that tell a story of a very ancient civilization predating 4004 BC. So predating at least Ussher's idea of the day that Adam was born, going back further than the time of Adam, and showing serpent worship, meaning that something was alive and well on the earth in those days that was worshiping serpents or serpentine beings of some sort. And all of these things are now just ruins and remains. Well, some Christians would say, well, that's because the flood happened. No, the flood was way later. So let's look at what could be potentially relics from a really, really, really ancient bygone era. Tiahuanaco. I really love studying Tiahuanaco. I always get super excited every time there's another Tiahuanacan discovery. But let me start with the Gate of the Sun, okay? Because the whole site is astounding. I mean, the irrigation of the waterways and the plants and everything, it's its whole other and unique story, but like that's one example. We did not have the intelligence to plant that kind of a garden in those days, where it survives the extreme colds of the night during desert, but it survives the extreme heats of the daytime in the desert at that elevation. And there's only one way that you can do it that would make anything survive, and that is so that in the middle of the night, the hot that is under the ground from the heat of the day continues to dissipate, and it does this neat thing with the frost that's fallen on the plants in the middle of the night, so it steams them up and it keeps them self-watering themselves.
Wow. We don't even really do those kind of things today. I need to take note of this for my own personal garden to survive the winter.
That whole irrigation system, that whole self-watering design is not something that we even really know how they did it today. And the only way they could have done it was if they had dug only so far down at precisely the correct distance between all the plants. So I'm sorry, I nerded out for a second. I'm not talking about plants, but I wanted people to hear me say Tiahuanaco.
It was a very advanced society is what you're trying to say.
The whole site is so incredible. Okay, so some archaeologists, because this is one of those places that's protected. It's considered kind of a sacred site, so they don't just allow any old archaeologist to come traipsing in and pouring concrete slabs so that they can, set up a big dig site, and they can't go chinking things off of stones.
Right.
You have those world-renowned archaeologists that are super, super, super careful, and then you have all the other ones, and they're just
trample on it and destroy it. And you're like, oh my gosh.
So this is one of those areas that's protected site. So this is why there's a range of archaeologists saying that it's not quite that old or whatever. But some archaeologists have studied this area and believe that it is between 12,000 to 14,000 years old. Some say much, much younger. But still, if there's even a possibility, and that is in part based on the archaeoastronomical nature of the Gate of the Sun that is there. Now, the Gate of the Sun is carved from a single monolithic stone. It weighs over 20,000 pounds. And here's the tricky part. It was carved from a quarry 10 miles away and transported to Tiahuanaco over land and water.
Wow.
So land and water, 10 miles of travel, and all you are, and 20,000 pounds, and you're going to put that on a pulley cart and whip your donkey. And for the ship to be large enough to carry it, it would have to be in a body of water large enough to go, and there aren't any. It's 10 miles over land and water away from the quarry where this Gate of the Sun, a single monolithic stone carved directly out of the face of the rock, 20,000 pounds over land and water. Okay, so I'm only scratching the surface here, folks. This gate features a round earth. Now you got to remember, to the ancients, they didn't have graphs and charts of what, they didn't in elementary school get exposed to the solar system and understand how the planets rotate. What they had was, I'm on the grass and I look up and there's a blue sky and it twinkles at night, but that's pretty much it. So they had flat earth. That's all they understood was flat earth. This particular gate, it features a round earth, not the flat earth of ancient thought. It details astrological phenomena in relation to equinoxes and solstices.
Wow.
It has the latitudinal position of the civilization as it would have appeared on a GPS system of the time. It features the obliquity of the ecliptic or the axial tilt. And what that is that's the alignments and the angles between Earth's rotational axis and its orbital axis. Come on, we're talking about people that have not yet been able to create a clay pot.
Right.
And they're going to know things like rotational axis and orbital axis and axial tilt, complex mathematics, including, get this, the correct ratio of pi, square roots, degree angles, and their practical trigonometrical uses in construction and astronomy. Please stop telling me that, some guys with some donkeys and some pulley carts did this. This is so long ago that this is an extreme display of intelligence.
Right.
All right. So, and here's the catcher. Remember how I said there's all these weird, like snake worshipy,
right,
mystical. Okay, the deity at the top of this gate of the sun is Viracocha or Quetzalcoatl. And that is a, wait for it, sea-traveling serpent god who created the sun, the moon, the stars, and giants. This is just like it loops and loops and loops
right.
and loops. It just keeps coming back. All right. Now, in case you're not yet convinced, Tiahuanaco, let's just say, okay, Donna, this is all really fascinating, but I still, some humans were around and they did it all. We haven't figured it out yet. Nope. Listen to this. Tiahuanaco is just under 13,000 feet in elevation. Wow. Now, what this means is that it is so deprived of oxygen that a human being would die after only 3 days. They would only survive 3 days in this area before they die of a pulmonary or cerebral edema or other fatalities. And yet we know, because we have been able to trace it, trek it, and look at it, that Tiahuanaco was inhabited for at least a half a century, at least 50 years, and probably a lot longer than that. Are you going to tell me that they went up and they would work for a day and a half or 2 days, and then they would go back down and be back at home, and they would and get the oxygen back in their system, and then go back up and trek up and do it again? Like, there's no reasonable explanation why any human being, any human body would be able to do this.
Right.
So either, again, it's humans, the dating is off, we don't really know how they did it, or it was something that was not exactly human, was not made in the image of God, and quite possibly made in the image of something much darker than that, or self-appointed warping of a fallen angel nature, where they were once beautiful and they pulled a Lucifer and they decided to follow him, and now they have been warped and become something else. And again, this whole site, if the archaeologists that are dating it are correct, it predates Adam.
Yeah.
So something was here. All right, let's continue on, because I know some people are going to go, no, I know this thing about Tiahuanaco that she doesn't know. That, so, okay, let's move on. Tiahuanaco's not the only one. Gobekli Tepe. All right, now this one, there has never been a settlement anywhere nearby where people could live off the land while they built this site. It is a pre-pottery Neolithic site dating to 10,000 to 6,500 BC.
Wow.
10,000 to 6,500 years earlier than that even.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who built this site, but it is a site of worship. It is 100% a worship ritual site, and it's huge. Okay, so there are T-shaped pillars all around, up to 20 feet high, some of them, and up to 40,000 pounds each. So we just got done talking about how amazing it was that somebody moved something 10 miles to Tiahuanaco from a quarry 10 miles away that was 20,000 pounds. This is 40,000 pounds, some of these. And you're just not going to get that on your pulley cart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but your donkey can't pull that. Okay. Now, moving on. Snakes are everywhere. Everywhere. The number one animal depicted all throughout the Gobekli Tepe site is snakes. Archaeologists have reported in a report called The Snakes of Gobekli Tepe, an Ethological Consideration, that the animal most frequently depicted is the snake, most likely the Macrovipera lebetina, the venomous blunt-nosed viper, which is evidence, this is a quote, evidence for a biblical theology that featured supernatural watchers.
Wow.
And of course, that is a term for the fallen angels of Luciferian origin. Also, some of these snakes, this is also a quote, depict groups of male snakes pursuing a female with the intention of mating. And then in parentheses, they noted that this was from Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And by the way, even the expert excavator, Klaus Schmidt, he was the main archaeologist, kind of considered the expert on this site for a long time until he died. He said that this site is absolutely not built by ragged bands of hunter-gatherers, and that hundreds of thousands of pounds of carved stones dedicated to serpents would have required, and I quote, hundreds of workers, all needing to be fed and housed. Again, how? There is no settlement anywhere nearby.
Right.
So Gobekli Tepe is very bizarre. It's very, very old. Actually, that one's considered to be one of the oldest sites that they believe to be human-built on the surface of Earth. And its sister site, okay, just right down the road from Gobekli Tepe is another one called the Karahan Tepe. It is strikingly similar to Gobekli Tepe in almost every single way, except they believe that it might be somewhere around 1,000 years older.
Wow.
And they just discovered this really recently, so there's only 1% excavated. They think only 1% excavated. But in that 1%, here's what we have. Serpentine religious imagery and artifacts everywhere, such as the long slithering viper along the site's third chamber, matching the Great Rift in the middle of the Milky Way, the tail of which connects to the constellation known as the Snake Tail Constellation, or Serpent's Cauda. But the real draw of Karahan Tepe is the phallus ritual room. Now, I obviously will not go into a whole lot of detail here. In structure AB, there is a room where there are 11 stone phalluses, about 6 feet tall, and they're all almost exactly the same height, almost like they might have had tables or some kind of a roof on them at one point.
Yeah.
So it might have been an inner chamber, we don't know. In front of all of these male reproductive stone figures is a half man, half snake who is jutting out of the wall and watching these reproductive parts. Okay? He watches over them. It's really kind of weird and creepy. Now, when the sun shines, this snake man's face lights up in a religiously ritualistic way because it's lined up with another solstice. So on, the perfect days of the year, it lines up and it goes directly across his face first. So this is all just like, this is ancient snake worship is what it is. Now, experts of the site have said that they believe that the snake man is Enki, which is a serpentine Nephilim god and god of water from the Gilgamesh epic. So, again, we're looking at what could potentially be something that happened around the Genesis 6 time, but based on all the scientific dating and based on the fact that we just don't even necessarily see any kind of, we just don't have any history from that long ago. It's very possible that what we're looking at is pre-adamite. And by the way, there's so many more examples in the book. I won't talk for very, very long about Baalbek. Fascinating site. I have done so many reports on Baalbek in college, outside of college. Baalbek is a very fascinating place. But one of the things that I find most fascinating is the two largest stones on the planet. That is, they are both housed right here at Baalbek. Wow. The first one is 64 feet long, 19.6 feet wide, and 18 feet high. That one weighs in at 3.3, and some say an estimated 3.6 million pounds.
Wow.
For one stone.
Yeah, that's very heavy.
Who quarried that? Yeah. Who moved that? Now, the dating of the stone is a little difficult. It has had a lot of radiocarbon contamination just because of visitors to the site and different things like that. But based on the quarry, not on the actual stone itself, and based on where they find it in the layers of the Baalbek original ruins. Because here's what's happening with Baalbek. The Temple of Jupiter was built on top of the Baalbek stones. There was this other Tel Baalbek, is what they call it, that was underneath the Temple of Jupiter. And then they came in and the Romans built on top of it. And when they did, now it's harder to get underneath of what they messed with and built and how they touched things, and that whatever their bodies were messing with the carbon datings. And, you get to where you get people tinkering and tampering with stuff later on. It gets really hard to radiocarbon date. But one of the layers where there's pottery fragments located in the channel below the Roman Temple of Jupiter, that is where they believe the original stone came from, which would make it 2,000 years older than Adam. Here's the other thing, is that it would have required an estimated 40,000 laborers to move it. So look, I'm going to bring it back around to theology just because this is the Donna Howell show and that's what we always do. I've only given you just a couple of examples. Look, there are so many weird things that we included in the book. Weird things. Did you know that there's like a paint studio that science has radiocarbon dated to be 100,000 years old?
Wow.
In a cave. And the Smithsonian, they were wild and news about it just a few years ago. But this person or people or cave dwellers or monkey men or whatever in the world Lucifer designed, whatever these things were that would have been around and thriving back then, they had at least enough knowledge of chemistry to know that you could melt down and crush bone marrow to make a bonding agent in your pigment so you can paint with it. Yeah. This is all stuff that they're discovering. And again, could be that the dating's off, but if that's even close to the dating that they're assigning to it, we're talking about something that was way before the Usher chronology, Adam era. All these things, I don't have time to get into all of it, but I just want to say, again, I'm bringing it back to theology. Watch this, folks. Isaiah and Jeremiah, because we've been talking about all these old cities, right? Where'd they come from? I beheld the earth. This is Jeremiah 4:23 through 27. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. So far, pause. The Lord's prophet is here saying, I looked at the earth back in the time when it was without form and void, or as we have suggested as an alternative, more accurate Hebrew translation, I looked back and remembered the earth as it was when the world was a desolate wasteland of chaos, because an enemy of God has done this. If that's new to you, you got to watch
to episode 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, because we've covered, this is like so amazing is where this comes in right here. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. So we're in void era context here, guys, before Adam. And all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate. What's he talking about?
Right.
Is it what cities? What cities? Okay, even if we were to say, no, everything Donna's saying, it's interesting and everything, but I don't believe it, I don't buy it. What he's talking about here is the without form and void. Because God's, like we said also in Brittany language, God's Play-Doh is still sitting right here. So a lot of the Christians, they think that without form and void, it means, well, he just wasn't finished yet. Yeah. He was still working on the planet at that time. Let's pretend that's true for just a moment. The cities thereof were broken down.
Why would there be cities on something that's incomplete? Why would God be pre-building cities on earth?
And why are there not more people recognizing that this verse is linked to the Tohu Vabohu era of earth?
Right.
It literally says right here, and lo, it was without form and void. It was Tohu Vabohu. He's linking it back to the original time in Genesis, and yet he's talking about cities being destroyed.
Right.
Okay. Isaiah 14:16 through 17. They that see thee, Lucifer, shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof? Again, What kingdoms? He's talking about the fall of Lucifer here. He's talking about the moment that he fell. They that see thee, Lucifer, shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth? They're remembering his fall right here in Isaiah 14. So if the context is Lucifer's fall, and they're talking about the kingdoms and the cities being destroyed because of something dumb he did, where does the other theological explanation come in that explain why there's cities, worlds being destroyed in this moment, unless it's talking about a desolation that occurred prior to Adam, between the creation of the earth and the time of Adam?
Right.
So there you have it. What kingdoms and cities are we even talking about in the void era, if not these weird sites that continuously point back to serpent worship? And like I said earlier, it's not just a fully working sewer system. And it's not just other weird out-of-place artifacts. By the way, there's a whole community out there studying out-of-place artifacts. They call them OOP parts, OOP parts. And they have got such a bad reputation. I mean, everybody out there is just thinking that they are just a conspiracy theory, nut community. But the truth of the matter is that there are actually things that they have found that do require an explanation. And the only explanations that even secular science gives acknowledges things. For instance, the World Coal Association insists that anytime you find something encased in coal, it has to be millions of years old. Okay, now every Christian in the world just laughed at that because they understand that we've found weird things that, like a bell, like a dinner bell that you would ring or something encased in a piece of coal in a cave somewhere. And when we find it, it's like, okay, does that mean that the bell is millions years old, or that the World Coal Association is way off when they start talking about like carboniferous rock and all of these different dating methods? I don't know. But the bottom line is there are anomalies we can't explain. Regardless of whether it's the World Coal Association that's wrong or us that's wrong, or regardless of who's wrong, why is there a bell, a dinner bell, in the middle of a piece of chunk of coal in a cave somewhere? Is it a ruin from some kind of a city? Weird artifacts like that. There are cart ruts all over the globe that date to the 12,000 BC mark, and they are all linked to astronomical or religious purposes. If you look at the trail that they were making, they're making it in response to the space bodies in the sky. Proto-dentistry, 9,000-year-old fillings and crowns.
Wow.
In skulls that they believe are human. There's so much more. But look, when we started off this series, the point of it is not to sit around and talk about things that are really interesting and hobnob. I love people, and I guess to some degree you could call me an entertainer-ish, because I like it when people are entertained. I like it when people can read a good book, watch a good movie, whatever. I'm not an entertainer. My purpose in this is not to entertain. There is nothing wrong with science, but science worship is real. Now, that's probably a very, very provocative way of saying it, because there's a lot of people out there that do believe in science, and if we call it science worship, they would take offense to that, and rightfully so, because they're not actually worshiping anything. But they so believe that to be the answer to all of the life's puzzles. They so embrace that.
Yeah.
That becomes their one and only kind of religious response. That is their religion. It might not be a religion in that it has a ritual attached to it and a god named this or that, but that becomes their kind of worldview, religious view. That is all they put their faith in. All they put their faith in. And as long as that is the case, people are going to draw lines between faith and science. And God is not going to be seen as the God of both.
Right.
Because you have Christians over here saying science is wrong, and you have secularists over here saying the Bible is wrong, and nobody wants to look at the both together.
Right.
They spend so much of their lives arguing about which one got it right when they don't realize they are pointing to the same conclusion.
Right.
But it takes backing up out of the fight and looking at this side and being able to put those two together before you can even see that the bigger picture that it paints is one where all voices merge. Who would have thought 4 weeks ago, whenever you started the series, or whether if you read the book, who would have thought in the beginning, that you could sit down and say, is the world old or is it young? And the answer would be yes. But it is. And so this is not about entertaining people. It's not about hobnobbing. It's not about being smart. It's not about being one of the scholars. Brittany, you know me. A lot of people listening to me don't know me, but you do. And you know that if it were my own prerogative and all I got to do was whatever I wanted to do, I would just be at home right now minding my own business and everybody else can work it out.
Right. Right.
But the reason I do this is because the age of the earth is an evangelistic tool. You got the ear of the scientist in the room. If Genesis somehow links to the known world, to the secular world, if it suddenly becomes relevant to the secular world, then watch what happens. Genesis can be believed as true. And then what happens? Its words about a Messiah can be true. And suddenly Jesus gets important fast. We must be willing to witness to the lost. And this is a way of doing that.
Right.
Understanding your facts and figures and knowing when we can't know. Being humble enough to say, yeah, science says this, the Bible says that, whatever. There's this one little part that doesn't really make sense. But instead of just dismissing it all and saying, I hang my hat, let's just forget about it, there is a point where all voices can merge. And here's why, because God is the master scientist. God wrote the word. God revealed himself in creation. He is the God of both. And if God wrote the Bible and if God created the earth, then finding a harmonious thread that weaves those two together is nothing short of an act of worship. There is nothing shameful about looking at the Bible in light of science and looking at science in light of the Bible. So many people are so worried about winning and having the answer. And this is one area that is extremely overlooked, but it is an evangelistic area and it is an evangelistic endeavor. So I pray that you at home got a lot out of this series. It was a beast to film. We've been at this a while. So I hope that you guys got a lot out of it, and I hope that you are encouraged. I hope that you feel like you've been given a creative, new way to maybe reach the lost in your community. People that say, I believe in science, you can now say, well, I kind of do too. Right. And then qualify that by being able to kind of parse all of these different details, take notes, take screen grabs. I really hope to hear great feedback from you guys on this one, and thank you so much for sticking through with the entire Before Genesis and Void Earth playlist. And thank you so much for joining us through this very long series. We'll see you soon.